Critics.
Critics.
Everybody loves the critics.
We have a very critical culture, don't we?
We do.
Yes. Very
Everybody's
polarized.
so busy trying to find something to be offended about.
Yep. And
We
I
got
don't
some
know.
keto critics.
Yes, we do. And it seems like diet is very polarized with very strong views on both sides.
Diet is the new religion in politics.
It seems that way. One of the things I like to do with things that are controversial or where there's polarization is I really try to listen to the other side. My view is on one of those sides. I try to understand where the other people are coming from. And when it came to trying to find the ideal diet, I certainly looked at what people were saying about ketosis. I found ketogenic diet helpful for me personally, and I've definitely found it helpful for patients, but there are some drawbacks. They're real. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to address them rather than dismiss them. And when we address them, we found plants actually take care of the criticisms of the ketogenic diet.
Right.
Which is really what led us to
Keto with plants.
There you go. All right, so why don't we kind of go over those issues? The first one really fascinates me. It's endotoxinemia. So for
endotoxinemia.
I knew you were going to go there.
Oh my gosh! Thank goodness he's here to remember all these big words.
All right, well here's a big word for you: lipopolysaccharide.
Lipopolysaccharide.
Which we'll call LPS from now on.
LPS.
So LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, is a chemical that is found in bacteria, specifically gram-negative bacteria, which tends to be kind of a nasty bacteria. Really can make us sick. So these bacteria are present in our guts, and their components, part of who they are, includes LPS. When we eat fats, and particularly saturated fats, which is kind of one of the things that the critics really sort of drill down on, that fat is almost like, it's like a tugboat, if you will. As the fat gets absorbed into our body, it drags with it these bacterial components. In fact, even entire bacteria can get sucked up with the fat because it's absorbed through a special system in our body called the lymphatic system. So these are similar to blood vessels, but it doesn't really pass blood. They are responsible for the absorption of fat from our diet. So if you eat a lot of meat, which has a lot of saturated fat, you're going to be dragging all this stuff that's very inflammatory. In fact, one of the most inflammatory substances known when it enters the bloodstream is LPS. So the lymphatics do drain into the blood. That means every time we eat meat, we are creating low-grade endotoxinemia. So endotoxinemia is LPS in the blood.
Okay.
That is very inflammatory. In fact, it can be life-threatening if enough of the toxin gets into our blood. So there's actually a very serious medical condition called septic shock. Mm-hmm. When we have bacteria in our blood, that's the end result, is you get septic shock, and it can actually be lethal. So we get microscopic doses of that every time we eat. Well,
eat saturated fat.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
Yes. So what's interesting is MCT, which is the main fat that we employ in our style of eating, does not...
Plant-based keto.
Correct, plant-based keto. Does not go through lymphatics. So unlike the other fats, it gets absorbed straight across our intestinal lining. And then it goes right into the portal vein, which is the main vein from the gut to the liver.
Uh-huh.
And in the liver, MCT is converted rapidly into ketones. So it's an extremely efficient conversion of that type of fat to energy.
And clean and dragging no bacteria.
Very clean. It's going across the cell, so the cell is acting like a filter. Mm-hmm. So it's really pure MCT. And that is really efficiently converted into ketones, which are a fantastic fuel source. So that's really the key here, is if you're going to have high fat, make sure it's a high percentage of MCT because it's not inflammatory.
Okay.
So that really neutralizes, frankly, one of the worst criticisms of ketosis, or I should say ketogenic diet.
That is a very valid one.
Yeah, which is the inflammatory aspect.
Of eating saturated animal fat. So are there any saturated non-animal fats? Is that a thing?
Well, so our good friend coconut oil, which has taken some heat recently,
Yeah.
because
Because-
it's saturated fat. Were you biting your tongue?
I am. I'm just calculating how many coconuts we grow in the United States. Not many.
No. But so there is legitimate concern that because coconut oil and coconut meat and all the coconut products actually contain saturated fat, because they're inflammatory. I think that we have to understand that that inflammation is largely from how they're absorbed. So it's not the actual saturated fat that's in coconut. In fact, the fats in coconut oil have anti-inflammatory properties themselves. So it's the byproduct of how they get absorbed into our body. Dragging those inflammatory substances is the issue. So that's item one. The next one would be phytonutrients. And if you're not getting enough plants, you're not getting enough phytonutrients. Plants are where we get our phytonutrients.
And this is something the critics are saying, that in traditional keto there aren't enough phytonutrients.
Correct. Now, if you really talk to people that work with patients and use ketogenic diets, they're going to emphasize that you get enough plants for the phytonutrients and the fiber, of course. But a lot of people think that a ketogenic diet is basically dairy and meat. And while it's certainly a traditional ketogenic diet is heavy in those things, it does include plants.
Right, it does. Of course, you can include them, but...
Yeah. So phytonutrients are something that obviously with our particular way of doing ketosis with plants, is going to make sure that we get lots and lots of phytonutrients.
Okay.
All right, so then I mentioned fiber.
Fiber.
Fiber. So important. Again, when you work with experts in a ketogenic diet, they're going to emphasize fiber, but generally speaking, they emphasize it with fiber additives.
Right.
So take a scoop of this fiber, a scoop of that fiber. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but when you eat plants, you get all the fiber you need.
You get fiber, phytonutrients, actual food, like it's all just already there.
Absolutely. So why the fiber is important, I think is important to understand. It's not so much for our own bodies, it's actually for the bacteria and other organisms inside our gut. They live on the fiber. And it turns out that the beneficial bacteria, the ones that actually make us thrive, they're the ones that really like fiber.
We want to keep them happy.
Keep them happy. And unfortunately, all those sweets that we like to eat, guess what? They do not feed the good bacteria.
They feed the bad bacteria.
Make us sick, make us not feel well. So that's why those things are not so good for us, whereas fiber, which is present in leafy greens and pretty much every other plant you can think of to some degree, really help us.
Okay.
And then the last thing, which is an interesting aspect of why we may not do so well with a ketogenic diet, is that there are toxins in our environment, and some of them actually accumulate in the fat tissue. It happens in us. In fact, one of the problems with, after a month or so of being on a ketogenic diet and not feeling well is because you lose weight, and that weight is fat. And when you lose that fat and you have these toxins, they get released in your bloodstream. So you actually get more toxic.
Because your toxins are kind of collected in your fat, drawn to your fat.
We like to call it sequestered.
Sequestered.
Just to be, big word.
Right.
So if you eat an animal that has fat and then has been exposed to these toxins, whether it's from pesticides or whatever they may be.
Which it is.
True.
On all the food they're eating.
That's generally true, yes.
Yeah.
These things will be in the fat that we eat, and when we eat them, we get a big surge.
So we're eating their fats, their constant sequestered toxins.
That's right, yes. So we're just getting like a bomb of toxins every time we eat animal fat. It is also present in plants, of course, but plants in general do not have a lot of fat, so you're not going to accumulate as much of the toxins in a plant. And then there's also, this, as you go up the food chain, kind of an accumulation that occurs in the toxin. So we mainly see that in fish. So small fish tend to have lower levels of toxin. The more predator, large fish, which eats the small fish, will bioaccumulate these toxins.
Right.
And that really hasn't been necessarily demonstrated, that I'm aware of anyways, with land animals, but certainly you can see that if the food does not have a lot of fat, it's not going to have a lot of fat-laden toxins.
Right.
So in general, plants are low in fat, and this would be less of an issue. So those are the four things that I think most people who are keto critics really kind of gravitate to as to why it would not be a good option. And really, all those are essentially neutralized when you do ketosis with plants.
Mm-hmm. Voila.
There you go.
There you go. Problem solved. The critics are all happy now.
Everybody's happy. No more polarization.
No. Win-win. We can all get along now.